had been wounded. Some of the military had given her some bandages. I remember especially they asked me to come. I'd kind of become the neighborhood doctor because of the situation. And I went over under candlelight the next evening to change the bandages. And she was so courageous. She didn't fall back. She didn't whimper. She looked trustingly into my eyes. And as I was peeling the tape off of her little tender shoulder, and the wound and the blood that was sticking to the bandage and stuff, I could hardly stop from crying. I finally got it disinfected and changed the bandage, and I said, oh, God, I can't do this again. And we took her the next day to the Red Cross hospital. They had to carry her. The snipers were shooting at us. I couldn't drive from my home anymore, but I had my car parked at the Red Cross. Philip's office. Margot mentioned Philip, an incredible man. And I drove back to the edge of our neighborhood as close as I could get, loaded her, several others into the car, took them to the little Red Cross field hospital. And as we were going back, right on the side of the road, I never heard it, but a little guy just dropped to the ground. A little guy, I say he was probably about 12, small, writhing in pain. And I realized everybody's running in different directions, and a sniper's bullet had found this little guy. I said to my buddy who was driving, stop, stop. We ran out, grabbed the little guy. It was a double cab pickup. It had been once to the UN and once stolen, and now it was mine. And we grabbed this little guy, threw him in the back seat with the people. We went back to the hospital. As we're driving, I'm leaning over the front seat trying to see if there's blood somewhere that we need to stop the bleeding or what. I can't find any wound. We get him to the hospital there, put him on a table. The doctors are busy. It's actually a classroom because it was a school. And finally, after examining him for a while, I find a tiny little hole that had entered in this cheek and not exited, but right under the skin on his stomach, you could still feel the bullet. And when the doctor could finally get to him, I showed him what I found and went on about my day. At the end of the day, I had to park the truck there at the Red Cross where it wouldn't be stolen, walking home through the valley, coming through a control by the militia. And on the other side is a young man. He has his assault rifle with a bayonet fixed on the end. He stops me, he points at my chest. And in the local language, I had to learn French, which was tough enough. So I didn't learn much Kinyarwanda, sadly. But he asked me for money, which I could understand in most languages. And I said, listen, buddy. I started speaking to him in French. I didn't know if he understood or not. I said, we're in the middle of this genocide. We will never survive if we don't work together. And I don't have any money. And I took the blade of the bayonet and pushed his gun to the side and started walking around him. And I could, out of the corner of my eye, see him turning with his gun. And I didn't know how many more steps. But I took about 50. And an older guy came out from the side. He says, how's my son? Well, I'm thinking about the guy up the road with the gun trained on us. And I'm saying, your son? Who's your son? Well, that boy you took to the hospital this morning. I said, oh, that was your son? And then I see an opportunity. Every situation is an opportunity. Every opportunity demands a choice. And I said, well, actually, I left him, and I think he's doing well. There's still some respect maintained among the elderly and the youth. And I looked back up, and the guy was still pointing his gun. And I said, you know, come with me for a minute. And we head back to this boy with this older man. And I said, tell him about your son, and tell him what happened this morning. And the old guy figures out the boy's been trying to get money, and it doesn't matter. The old guy doesn't have a gun. He starts, boom, 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 just giving that boy the business. He lowers his gun. He lowers his head. He walks away. I never had any more trouble in that neighborhood. Every situation is an opportunity. I want to show you a picture of a little guy who isn't holding a machine gun with a bayonet. He's taking a load home. It's his own little homemade scooter. They got them all around Rwanda. It's so cool. They're so ingenious. I go off all the times on the rubber shock absorbers in the front and everything. I was auto mechanics and welding. That was my background. And so anyway, when I went back again last year and saw these kids, and I come around a corner in the road, and there's a gang there, and all of a sudden, my heart jumps in my throat, because I remember coming around the corner and finding those gangs, but instead of having machetes, they've got textbooks, and they're coming from a class. And little guys like this guy, instead of carrying grenades and machine guns, are back to making scooters and looking after the family. In fact, little kids are looking after a lot of the families in Rwanda today. So many orphans. Taking in, dropping out of school, not only to take care of their little brothers and sisters, but to take care of the neighborhood kids. I'll tell you one last story from the orphanage that you saw in the clip. Before the day that we were able to move the orphans out of that orphanage, and it had gone from about 80 kids to over 200 kids, there was a lady there. She was an on-the-job trained nurse by the name of Tryphene. She was incredible. Every time I would show up, the kids were dying at this orphanage from dysentery. I would show up with water just to drink. They would line up at the little reservoir with one metal cup for just 1 cup of water. And I would bring Tryphene a box of antibiotics and medicines from the Red Cross. The Red Cross couldn't move around the city anymore because they'd stop their vehicles and they would kill more Red Cross workers with that Red Cross on their chest were killed in the Rwanda genocide than in any of the other wars combined. The Red Cross meant nothing during that time. And I would take Tryphene a box of medicine, and Tryphene would treat me like an angel. She would just thank me so much. I'm like, no, Tryphene, you are the angel. I go home. I had 2 Tutsi people staying in my home. They put faces right at the beginning. When Teresa and I were making the decision, we knew if we left, they would be killed right away. But my home was quite clean. It wasn't overcrowded. I didn't have little kids who had been terrorized, who had witnessed the murder of their parents. I didn't have all the runny noses and the runny bottoms and the nightmares. And Tryphene, she was the angel. And I arrived one day, and I said, où est Tryphene? Where's Tryphene? Qu'est-ce qui est passé? What's happened? Nobody answered. It was as if, you know, I'm thinking, well, my French isn't that hot, and it's their second language. I ask again. Finally, it comes through. Not going to see Tryphene again. I'm like, wait a minute. You know, I didn't even know she was Tutsi. And here, so angry, so angry. It was just about 2 years ago I learned that Tryphene was not only caring for these kids, but the militiamen, the slaughtering teams, would bring their buddies to her to be treated. And as she would be treating them, she wouldn't know if the blood on their shirt was their blood or the blood of the parents of the kids she's trying to comfort at night. And I said to myself, how could she? The last thing her husband and her children saw, because her husband and children were hiding in the orphanage, the last thing they saw was her being forced into a vehicle by the militiamen, supposedly to treat one of their wounded comrades. I'm thinking, how could she do that? How could she be treating these orphans and treating these killers? Get a chance to read another book about Rwanda genocide. It's called Left to Tell. That's why I was back there last year, Immaculée Ilibagiza. She said